Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of Star Wars: The Skeleton Crew, Episode 5 and Episode 6. So many fun Easter eggs across these two episodes, great attention to detail. So let's dive in, and thank you for your patience. We didn't want to force our editors to work over the holiday week, and I wanted to spend some time with my kid rather than tell everyone in the house to shut up while I put on this Disney Plus show. Even though maybe I should have done that. This show rocks. Also, we have some amazing Neil-inspired designs with some products exclusive at our merch store, nerdriot.shop. It's the best way to show that real Neil Nation pride and support what we're doing here. Okay, let's start with episode 5. You have a lot to learn about pirates. Once again, the Lucasfilm headline up, R2-D2, then Captain Silvo, aka Jod Wood, aka Crimson Jack, aka Dash Zenton, aka Jodwig Zank, aka Professor Umium Gorlox, then an RX series droid, C-3PO, Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker in his pod racer helmet, an AT-AT and safety droid, a Mandalorian helmet, and SM-33. Episode 5 opens in the workplace of Wendell, Wim's father. He works an admin accounting position on AT-AT, sharing a cubicle with an Ithorian whose eyes are way too close to the screen. In the opening frames, actually, the wide shot of this workspace includes an engraved wall on the far right that seems to show someone from Neil's species, which is also depicted in statue form in the city center in episode 1. I'm assuming this might be the supervisor or some early leader of AT-AT. Neil's mother, Nuna, drops by to give Wendell a way to get the access code for the barrier to get a message out to their kids in a kind of not that smooth Office Space style code hacking floppy disk handoff. Wendell, you'll notice, still wears his wedding band. Wim mentioned his mother used to read him stories, and he tells Jod how that mom is no longer in the picture. And I feel like there's got to be a story there. Like she might have discovered what horrible things AT-AT's minted money was funding, and she was taken away. I'm just thinking they gave us a close-up of that ring intentionally. The safety droid easily spots Wendell's actions, but Farah wipes its memory, which remember is exactly what Fern did in episode 1 on the home security droid in order to fool her mom. Like mother, like daughter. Also, the AT-AT supervisor's tower is prominently in the background of the scene, glaring at them like an eye of Sauron. Just a reminder that on Akron, that structure was the fallen sanctum with all the secrets in it. And the supervisor on this planet's tower probably knows quite a bit about those secrets. SM-33 meanwhile confirms that his original captain was Tak Rennod. In episode 4, Jod exclaimed Rennod's ghost, and now literally Rennod's ghostly form returns to him in this episode. I pointed out before how Rennod is Donner in reverse, a reference to Richard Donner, director of Superman and the Goonies. And now with Tak as his first name, reversing the full name of Tak Rennod gives you Donner Cat, K-A-T, which I might be stretching here. Sounds a bit like Donner Cut, as in the famous Donner Cut of Superman 2, which was the first instance of a fan base rallying behind a director's cut of a movie when that vision was at odds with the studio and inspired, for better or worse, much of what fandom is all about nowadays. They're weighed down for weapons by some guards, one of them played by Dwayne Colbert, someone many of us at New Rockstars know from the LA comedy scene. Good for you, Dwayne! Behind him are the first of many Star Wars species cameos that we see in this episode, a group of Mon Calamari being greeted with lays. We see this Mon Calamari shortly after this in the lobby. The server who hands Jod a drink is a Swearton, another species introduced in The Last Jedi in that Canto Bight casino, and has since showed up in episodes of The Mandalorian. Sweartons were named after the Spanish word suerte, meaning luck, and they are believed to be able to influence probability. SM-33 is given a restraining bolt, which is a common piece of tech in Star Wars, introduced all the way back in the 1977 film, as a way to keep droids under a specific kind of control, but it hasn't always been shown to be the kind of shock collar as it is for SM-33 in this episode. As they walk through the lobby, playing the harp, the species with the multiple arms might be a Kodra G, a four-armed species first introduced in Vonda McIntyre's 1994 Star Wars novel, The Crystal Star, but we don't know for sure this is a Kodra G. I just hope it is. When the concierge mentions a buffet, notice how Neil's snout sniffs? Following this trunk will be his key contribution later in this episode. As they look out over the mud baths, we see some more familiar Star Wars species, including some Muns. We later see they're wearing head towels. The Mun species is the species of Darth Plagueis the Wise, who recently made his first live-action appearance in The Acolyte. These Muns are probably with the Banking Clan Summit. There are also some Ongrees in these tubs, if you look closely. The concierge says the Banking Clan is currently having a summit here. The Banking Clan was part of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, aka the Separatists, during the Clone Wars, and I just gotta say, I have been bringing up the Banking Clan specifically as possibly connected with the current operation on AT-AT, because they do have a separatist-esque reliance on droids and an ongoing need to print money despite whatever the current generation's war is. Behind the check-in desk, we see a few Biths wearing sunglasses. I feel like these might be famous musicians because Biths are known for being rock stars. Jod is recognized by Pokkit, a bounty hunter played by Kelly MacDonald, known for a ton of roles, including in Boardwalk Empire, Helena Ravenclaw in Deathly Hallows Part 2, Merida in Pixar's Brave. It's hard to tell, but she might be a cage species like Barash Sylvain in the High Republic. She also kind of looks like Kreia, aka Darth Treya from Knights of the Old Republic 2. Pokkit knows Jod as Dash Zenton, which recalls Dash Rendar, the mercenary and smuggler from Shadows of the Empire with Crimson Jack, it seems like they might have just pulled a bunch of random badass names to make them Jod's aliases. Pokkit says she now only works for a private client and no longer takes the low-rent guild jobs with the pucks. She's referring to the Bounty Hunters Guild that was shown in the Mandalorian series, the low-paying gigs that Din Djarin used to take. She warns the kids,
"Don't trust this Slimo."
Slimo is a Huttese profanity, meaning something like shithead, first heard when Sebulba and Anakin traded words before the pod race in The Phantom Menace. KB is suddenly nervous about going down to the spa.
"I can't go down there."
You worried about corrosion from the steam?
"No, it's just gross is all."
While this might just be a kid being nervous about having to go to a pool party, it does seem to be setting up some big reveals for the character later. SM33 explains who the skeletons were on the ship: Rennod's first mate who mutinied him, and Rennod's concubine, aka a mistress, who stabbed Rennod in the back, and Rennod locked the controls so that the mutineers would go down with the ship on At-Atin. Jod tells Wim to forget his dead mom and his alive dad.
They're what you call attachments, and they're the last thing you need. Forget them.
Presumably, this would be something Jod learned from his Jedi training, to let go of personal attachments because they create anxiety and fear, which of course can lead to the dark side. That's what happened to Anakin Skywalker when he couldn't let go of his mother. But then Jod confirms it with this very specific phrase.
Remember, your focus determines your reality.
Qui-Gon Jinn said the exact same thing in The Phantom Menace to Anakin Skywalker.
Always remember, your focus determines your reality.
So based on Jod's age, he was almost certainly alive during the events of Order 66, just very young. He could be another Jedi who, like Grogu, miraculously escaped the Jedi Temple on the night of the Purge, or like Cal Kestis, a Jedi apprentice somewhere else during the end of the Clone Wars and managed to escape from that. He could have heard that phrase from Qui-Gon himself, or from Master Yoda, or Master Obi-Wan, or Master Windu at any other time in the Temple. It just seems like we're gonna have another tragic Order 66 flashback coming our way. SM33 brings them to Lanupa, which Jod recognizes as a luxury resort destination, similar to Canto Bight in The Last Jedi. SM33 says it goes by many names, including Battle World. So Battle World, of course, is the setting in Marvel's Secret Wars comics, and I only bring it up because former Marvel Comics editor-in-chief Tom DeFalco explained recently on the official Marvel podcast that the original 1984 Secret Wars crossover event really came about when Mattel licensed Marvel's characters for a new toy release, and Mattel pitched the name Secret Wars to capitalize on the early 80s popularity of Star Wars. So in that way, it's kind of all connected. Jod notices a few pleasure yachts. We have seen pleasure yachts in Star Wars before, specifically Dryden Voss's pleasure yacht in Solo: A Star Wars Story. The Lanupa concierge is played by Julie Ann Emery, best known for playing Betsy Kettleman in Better Call Saul. She is such a good actress. I love her expression as she goes from an inviting smile to the frown of a hotel clerk when someone pulls up to the valet in a rusty RV. The Lanupa sigil is on her clothes and the uniforms of the guards, and it almost looks like they took Captain Rennod's original symbol and made it kind of a swishy Star Wars papyrus font version to put on their bathrobes to look exotic and inviting. Similarly, in the real world, many popular tourist resorts on Caribbean islands are built on and around where pirates and privateers would live and plunder. The Onyx Cinder thunks out what looks like just a car hubcap and a bunch of leaking fluid on this luxury speeder, which sets up the fun game later when Gunter's ship completely crushes some of these parked vehicles. Jod claims he's escorting the 4 wise elders from the Bratric system, which does not seem to exist in Star Wars, but I think he's just playing on the word brat, like there are 4 brats. The brats come down via the cargo arm, which remember Wim was playing on back in episode 3. And yes, 4 kids dressed up as adults in pirate clothes recalls the Lost Boys and Steven Spielberg's Hook masquerading as pirates at the pirate baseball game. Niels' hood makes him look like a Jawa, while Wim wears this beard that makes him look like Davy Jones from the Pirates of the Caribbean films. Back down by the mud baths, a Trogloff species delivers food to a Hutt, and Hutt just eats this Trogloff, who says, "Oh, not again." We see Trogloffs on Canto Bight in The Last Jedi as well, working the gambling tables, but this Hutt has a specific chin tattoo that was also on the chins of the Hutt twins that we saw in the book of Boba Fett. So it's not clear this Hutt is just one of those twins or just part of the same branch of the family as they are. It makes me think we might see Black Chrysanthemum again. That'd be fun. We also got some confirmation that Jeremy Allen White is playing Jabba the Hutt's son, Rota the Hutt, that we saw in the original episode of the Clone Wars series. So I think the Hutts are going to be very much involved in this era of Star Wars as we move toward that movie. Wim and Neil go back to using their their Jedi 1, Jedi 2 call signs from episode 1, Jod has found some Urkatat Sith Runes. Whoa! Urkatat runes appeared on Ochi's dagger in The Rise of Skywalker, on the Peridia Temple in Ahsoka, and throughout the Rebels series. In this case, even using the Urkatat alphabet key, these runes don't seem to spell anything out. We have to ask, why would Sith runes be here on Lanupa, in addition to it being Captain Rennod's hideout? Did he select it because it had some spooky significance to the Sith? Does like the geothermal energy creating the natural bubbles in the hot springs of the mud baths come from some kind of dormant volcanic activity similar to the volcano that powers the Sith temple in Mustafar? Did they just throw these runes in here as Easter eggs? Who knows? But the fake name that Jod had used at the front desk, Umium Gorlox, was the name of one of the Muns that the guards talked to in the mud bath. The Muns come from the planet of Scipio, the frozen planet home to the Muns and to the Baking Clan. Fern finds Rennod's sign on the grotto, marking the entrance to his lair in plain sight. And we gotta say, this whole thing of an ancient enclosure hidden all this time beneath a well-trod modern structure is something that you do see a lot in treasure hunting movies, from the Uncharted games to the Chamber of Secrets being beneath the Hogwarts third floor lavatory, or the Knights Templar tomb hidden beneath the obvious X on the floor of the Venice Library in The Last Crusade. Fern and Wim meet Cthallops, a large unknown species, though it sounds like they just kind of took the word scallop and gave it the Cthulhu treatment. Meanwhile, above, the guard offers yet another alias for Jod.
Halt that sentence, aka Mad Captain Silvo, aka Jodwick Zank.
Jodwick Zank? Is Jodwick a nod to John Wick? Either this is a name Jod gave in some past clumsy, rushed scenario, like someone might have overheard him being called Jod and asked him about it and he improvised and he's like, yeah, Jodwick Zank. Or maybe the guard could be mixing up all these past names of Jod Nana Wood and Dash Zenten and is basically calling Jod Glub Shito. However you read it, it's very funny. They muddy these guards and Cthallops gets them to the tunnels below. These tunnels are filled with booby traps, making this part of the episode, especially with Gunter's gang chasing them, feels a lot like the Goonies. The kids step on a trigger that emits a laser that would have decapitated them if they were taller, recalling the first task of Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade with the razor blade, only the penitent's man shall pass. In a way, it makes these kids' shortness and their youth and their innocence a virtue, in the way that reverence was a virtue in the Grail quest of that movie. A guard finds another booby trap where if you pass something into the light, the gravity inverts and lifts it into a spike ceiling. This recalls the light-sensitive booby trap in Raiders of the Lost Ark in the Peru Temple and the spike chamber in Temple of Doom. Actually, the way Jod tells these kids, don't touch anything, and then they immediately touch something is just like Indy with Short Round. The group finds a pool of acid, and written above in Orabesh, all who enter paradise must make the greatest sacrifice. This recalls the magic in the cave in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, in which Dumbledore had to wound himself to enter the cave, and once inside, had to drink the emerald potion to obtain the locket buried within it. But Jod says the title of the episode.
You have a lot to learn about pirates.
Jod and Rennod know that it's not life that's the most precious to a pirate, but treasure, and that any pirate who would get to this point would never think about parting with gold. It's almost like Jod knew that they would run into something like this because he kept one Old Republic datery despite dumping what seemed like all of them before the concierge. When the acid drains, you can see some skulls and bones of past pirates skittering around the gutter, and finally to the treasure room. Composer Mick Giacchino mixes in a sting of John Williams' Ark of the Covenant theme, and that music is 15 because to the right of Wim, that is the Lucasfilm Ark of the Covenant prop from Raiders of the Lost Ark. Star Wars and Indiana Jones are of course both Lucasfilm properties. They love to reference each other. R2 and 3PO were in glyphs on the side of the Ark enclosure in Raiders. In Andor, the Sankara stones from Temple of Doom were in Luthen Rael's shop. And even this Ark was in Clone Wars, Season 1, Episode 21, Liberty on Ryloth, carted away by some battle droids, considered a Ryloth Ark. They also pass a golden statue that looks like a member of Neil's species, although it might also be Hooter from Captain EO. Wim finds a lightsaber, so let's talk about this hilt design. The gold and silver plating suggests that this probably came from the High Republic era, when that color scheme was particularly popular. But in the earlier stages of the High Republic, Jedi lightsabers were far more ornate, many with artsy flourishes and crossguards and dual emitters to reflect the personality of the wielder. But around 229 BBY, the Jedi enacted what was called the Guardian Protocols, where all lightsabers were recalled to really clean up the Jedi act to face the coming threat of the Nihil, a fleet of Viking-esque warriors led by Markian Ro. I'm assuming this would be a High Republic Jedi lightsaber from the later stages of the High Republic, but still before what we saw on the Acolyte. It also might suggest that Captain Rennod might have broken off from the Nihil of that era. And remember before, when they wanted to split up as a kind of Scooby-Doo gag where Wim and Neil wanted to explore the buffet, now it pays off. Neil follows his trunk to know that all the food on the table is rotten except one item, which is the trigger for the data port. A holo projection shows the coordinates to Atten, with the Orbesh reading Atten, and then beneath SEC A113, which is a recurring animator Easter egg referencing Cal Arts Classroom A113. Jod orders SN33 to refill the chamber with acid. You can hear Gunter screaming "Silvo!" as he burns. Rennod's ghostly recording is projected on his throne, flickering and not showing his face. The fact that they are obscuring his face here suggests that they want what he looks like to be a pretty big reveal. Specifically, I'm thinking he's going to be a member of Neil's species, maybe even Neil's distant ancestor. Like, I think what happened was Rennod survived that crash landing on Atten, and then he, like the Wizard of Oz, arriving to this land, kind of overtook it and established himself as a dynasty of supervisors, and that one of his descendants is that species statue that we saw in the city square that we've seen in engravings, and that led to Neil and his family. Rennod's recording confirms that Atten's true treasure is that it is the last remaining Old Republic mint, meaning a place that can refine gold and other precious metals into accepted currency by the governments and the galactic economies. So it can therefore be used to control things like the rate of inflation. That is the real power in the galaxy. If you can control what currency is worth by minting more of it or less of it whenever it suits you, you can control the true levers of power when it comes to territorial disputes, trade disputes, armed conflicts. You always follow the money. That's why we have so many domestic conflicts in America over the Federal Reserve. There's always fights over the International Monetary Fund. And the fact that Captain Rennod understood that suggests that he would be in a position to be able to stay behind and govern this mint to his advantage. Also, listen to the music here as Jod puts this together. Those four notes are the Dies Irae melody. Dun, 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 dun. It's a theme used to convey foreboding and doom in countless cinema scores. This series might be setting up Atten to explain how the Shadow Council or the First Order are being funded. Jod invokes his right to challenge the captain as per the code, and for a moment, it really does seem like he's ready to hurt a child. And if you'll notice, as KB watches, a tear rolls down her cheek. Wim steps forward to protect his friend, but whoops. Oh my god, it's perfect. It's just like Neil trying to pick up the blaster on the way out of Port Vogo in episode 3, and then like putting it down out of fear. This is just far more true to how a kid would actually react to that. But these four kids escape being taken prisoner by Wim activating that trapdoor, taking them who knows where for now. Jod uses the Force to grab the lightsaber, and he ignites it right after we cut to black. It's another example of Jod not wanting to present himself as a full Jedi in front of others, even including us, the viewers, because he is trying to forget his past. Episode 5 was directed by Jake Schreier, who's also directing Marvel's upcoming film, Thunderbolts, and the strength of episode 5, I think, is a good indicator of the fun that movie will be. Investing in your health is the best investment you can make. A few years ago, I would have thought that meant like a gym membership, but there are easier, more convenient ways to improve your wellness day to day. For me, getting an Uplift standing desk has been such a game changer. Uplift desks are great. The main thing being that because I'm not sitting all day, I have more energy and I'm more focused. Plus, I don't have that slouchy shoulder and neck pain at the end of the day. I can adjust my desk so my screen and keyboard are at the perfect height so I can work comfortably. Also, Uplift desks are super customizable. They offer all kinds of sizes, materials, drawers, outlets, mounts, anything you could think of really. There are over 200,000 different configurations, so you can really get a desk that is perfectly dialed in for what you need. Head to upliftdesk.com/new Rockstars and check out their holiday gift guide and use our code New Rockstars to make the most of Uplift's holiday sales. Plus, get free same-day shipping, free returns, and an industry-leading 15-year warranty that covers your entire desk and an extra discount off your entire order. That's upliftdesk.com/New Rockstars for a special offer, and it's only available at our link. Work better, live healthier with Uplift Desk. Okay, now moving on to episode 6, Zero Friends Again. It was a much more personal episode focused on KB and the challenges of friendship with some incredible visual symbolism, especially at the climax, so let's break it down. It opens with the 4 kids sliding down the tunnel pipes with intercutting shots of each kid sliding, reminiscent of the water slide sequence in the Goonies. But it's particularly sad now, knowing what's coming, to see KB here trying to hold her head up to keep her Augs from scraping the metal. But you can still hear her Augs emitting a kind of little warning chirp to indicate something is wrong. And the fact that these kids, other than KB, land safely in the snow suggests that Captain Rennod engineered this trapdoor not as a Dr. Evil death pit for his enemies, but as an escape hatch for himself if he ever needed to flee. This episode details more of what's going on with KB's anatomy. Fern explains that her Augs sometimes go bad and that she needs to reset her occipital link. Occipital refers to the lobes in the back of the brain, and the occipital bone is the part of the skull that covers the back of the head. KB had some past incident causing her to require Augs powered by a microfuse. This is what KB's parents were worrying about when they talked about this in episode 2, and back in episode 5, this is why KB was so worried about going down to the spa. She worried that her microfuse would get wet or corroded. Now, this show's creators confirmed that KB's character design was based on Lobot, Lando Calrissian's companion from Cloud City in The Empire Strikes Back. Other stories go deeper into Lando and Lobot's adventures before and after Empire Strikes Back, but Lobot allowed the Empire to implant an AJ-6 cyborg construct to enhance its productivity. A similar head cybernetic implant was worn by the clone trooper Echo in the Bad Batch series. KB's Augs seem to be similar to Echo's in that they are worn for medical reasons. While the kids dumped down and out from Captain Rennod's treasure room, Jod climbs up just covered in jewelry and laughing like a madman. But his smile drops when he recognizes the concierge plus a few disgruntled guests. I assume the ones whose speeders were damaged by Gunter's ships, including the Mon Calamari we saw last episode. And on the far left, that is a Chidek species. That's the engorged egg sac covered species of singer Ubla Mulbro, who appeared on Canto Bight in The Last Jedi. This one may very well be Ubla herself, just a few decades younger. Even before the camera dollies right to reveal Gunter right behind Jod, you can actually see Gunter already standing there when Jod first rises up out of the hatch. Like, the reason the concierge and these VIP guests were standing there is probably because Gunter and the other pirates were frisking them for valuables, and Jod just rose right up into that stick up. And yes, I guess Gunter did not burn in acid, but he probably lost at least a few pirates in it. Jod's big plan here was to call SM-33 as an attack dog, but Gunter immediately stuns him. I love that the tiara 33 was wearing flies off and clatters on the deck.
33! Attack!
A Quarren member of this pirate gang alerts him to some X-Wings and beef. The name of the pirate with the same facial scarring as Dr. Evazan from A New Hope says, Bildrat is what Snowball is, the rat that lives inside of SM-33's head. The theory we pitched over in the break room a few weeks back is that this could all be a Ratatouille, House of Mouse, rat running the show deal, and I hope something comes out of that. The kids watch as the X-Wings engage Gunter's ships, and Wim realizes that the X-Wings are the good guys, which probably makes him feel a little bad for firing on them in episode 3. The X-Wings round the corner.
They lost her!
Words recalling another Amblin classic.
11!
But that's not what I'm gonna do.
KB miraculously recovers and then takes a justified attitude with Fern when Fern is like, okay, great, let's climb up this huge cliff that only I will be able to climb. Clearly, KB is frustrated with Fern for not really checking in with her after a major injury and just calling the shots without taking in anyone else's input. And KB doesn't want to have to explain to her friend that her physical disability makes these kinds of things harder for her. It's a super nuanced arc for this episode that speaks to what I'm sure a lot of younger viewers are going through, something that we never really get to see in Star Wars. And I applaud director Bryce Dallas Howard and the actors, especially Kiriana Crater, for handling it with such patience and authenticity. Wim and Neil get swarmed by trash crabs. I love these guys. These are creatures that find scraps to use as shells like hermit crabs. I'm sure John Watts might have had on his mind the Simpsons episode The Summer of 4'2" when Lisa explains hermit crabs to the cool beach kids and accidentally uses the word crustacean, and they start to figure out that she's actually secretly a nerd. And Lisa Simpson in that episode probably feels like KB in this episode. It's why it's like a top 5 Simpsons episode for me. Why do I bring up the Simpsons stuff? Well, the working title that John Watts chose for the Skeleton Crew is Grammar Rodeo, which was a Simpsons reference. And I really do think John Watts was thinking about those early seasons of The Simpsons and their universal coming of age, grounded emotional arcs, along with other influences like Richard Donner and Steven Spielberg and Captain EO and just general 80s Star Wars culture. So this show is kind of best appreciated if you know what those earlier seasons of The Simpsons were all about. Now, one of these trash crabs has a leg of a protocol droid as its body. I like the idea that this could be C-3PO's original leg piece before it was swapped out for an off-color one between the events of Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. We later see another trash crab with a stormtrooper helmet, and another has the top of a C-1 series astromech droid like Chopper from Rebels. I'm sure it was some other C-1 astromech that Chopper just murdered when it looked at him the wrong way. There's also a crab with a shell shell of a Marksman H training remote, you know, the spherical ones that Luke was training with on the Falcon in A New Hope. Meanwhile, the pirates return to Brutus's space station. This is a former Republic Haven-class medical station, which we saw in the Clone Wars series, specifically the Malevolence arc, when Anakin and Ahsoka had to defend one of these from General Grievous. The herald of the pirates is a Kitiran species named Snobby's Snee.
Captain Brutus will now pronounce the verdict.
And this guy is voiced by John Hodgman. The crew include a Gran and a Trandoshan and a Klatooinian, as well as an Aqualish. Like the Ravagers and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Jod is sentenced to death by airlock. Now, this female pirate, Chelt, is played by Dale Souls, who also voiced Darby Steele in Pixar's Lightyear. Jod gives a hell of a speech that shows really how he has so successfully survived this long as a pirate leader. And it's gonna feel like recap here, but I think we should really take it beat by beat to understand how masterful of a rhetorical success this was. Notice how he uses every second of his given time in that plasma hourglass. He even takes a long pause at the beginning to grab everyone's attention, and then he opens with just simple remarks of, "I'm hungry. I've always been hungry." And in doing so, he relates with all these other pirates with humility and stirs up a righteous hunger for never getting enough of a pie that was always too small. And then, as a classic populist, he promises everyone grand dreams that he has no idea if he will actually be able to deliver, but he knows that he has an ace in the hole, physical evidence in the form of a golden Old Republic datary, one that he knows the Nikto pirate Vane saw at Port Borgo. And that is why he kept a few of these and had one to spare when he tossed it in the acid, because he knew that he might have to win these pirates over at some point with a speech just like this. And in this part of the speech, he actually does something similar to what we saw Paul Atreides do in Dune Part 2. It's a really smart rhetorical tactic when you're facing a hostile audience to just single out what seems like the most skeptical, most hostile person in the audience, and then relate to them and apologize and just kind of connect to them and win them over. And if you can flip over that individual, they're kind of like tentpole individuals, and the rest of the crowd might be able to follow suit in clumps. So here he starts with Glurb the Quarren, and he promises him an entire ocean. Like for the Quarren species who are always at war with the Mon Calamari, the whole idea of an ocean is like so precious to them. And notice how when Jod promises a whole ocean, he widens his hands, but only as far as the cuffs on his wrists allow him, as if to say, if you only uncuffed me, I could deliver that whole wide ocean to you. But then Jod sees Kona's coldness, and he straight up apologizes to her for never promoting her when he was captain. Now, Kona wears weathered pieces of white armor, which the audio description confirmed belonged to an Imperial stormtrooper. And Jod, after offering the juicy carrot of the Old Republic datary, he then goes full Paul Atreides by appealing to superstition, invoking the ghost of the legendary Captain Rennod, and he does this performative theatrical speaking in tongues rolling R.
And I know where they make them. I know where they make them because I heard it from Rennod himself.
And then he completes this religious conversion by leading the pirates in a communal sea shanty, one that they all know the words to.
Rennod soared away, away, aboard the Onyx Cinder.
Brilliant. He invites Kona to complete the lyric that he knows full well, but he gets one of the greatest skeptics in the crowd to help him complete the sentence. It's like in Jaws, when the three men of that pseudo-pirate crew only truly bond as brothers when they share their scars and sing a sea shanty. Show me the way to go home. So Jod offers these pirates the entire Criffing galaxy, once again using the Star Wars in-universe swear word that inverts the word fricking. Meanwhile, Wim and KB follow the trash crabs past a pile of droids. Apparently Lanupa, in addition to the Skull Mountain Spa, is also home to heaps of garbage, maybe a sign of the waste such resorts build up. The pile that Wynn notices is a droid that reminds him of SM-33, and I think I spotted an RX series droid in there. KB says that since this past accident, Fern assumes that they can both do all the same things, but that KB is just simply different. Now, we still don't know what this accident is, but it does put into a new context the two of them zipping around at Atten on that speeder bike, and how KB really might have been feeling during those turns and those jumps. And like Tony Stark talking Pepper Potts through replacing his arc reactor in his chest, the sweetest scene of the first Iron Man film, the sweetest scene of this episode has KB telling Wim to remove the resonator housing and remove the microfuse, all while she's bearing her soul to him.
I'll have zero friends again.
Zero Friends again is this episode's title, and it's such a sad way for someone like KB to assess their friend situation. Not no friends, but zero friends. It's kind of like there's a mathematical certainty to it. But Wim just shrugging and saying, you could just be friends with me and Neil like it's nothing, means the whole world for KB. For her, it previously was binary, either zero friends or one friend, but for the first time, she has been invited to have two friends. And that is so game-changing. So Wim melts the light wires while KB sticks the dead fuse in the sand to make a mold for the molten wire metal, and luckily this works.
Probably thought it would be more exciting to save someone's life. Anyway, thanks, Jedi.
I love this line. Not only is it adorable, it demystifies what it means to be a life-saving Jedi. Sometimes making a life or death difference can just be following the steps of a simple but necessary procedure and ultimately just listening. But if you'll notice, the trash crabs are really just repeating the word home after Wim says it. So it's just clear that they are just picking words of his and repeating them, which tricked Wim into thinking they're on the same page, but it's just nothing. The two were drawn in as food to the alpha trash crab. This is awesome. Like any great rat king, the shell of this alpha seems to be made of a lot of different stuff. Some heavy duty Star Wars hardware, including, I think, some fuselage of a Star Destroyer, like the turbo laser of it. And you can also see an astromech on the shell just stuck to it. And it kind of looks like R2-D2 or just a similar shaped astromech as KB and Wim are airlifted away. The Tippett studio actually revealed in a featurette that this mama crab's name is Tetanus, a reference to its tetanus looking rusty points. And in addition to a confirmed R2-D2 model that they put on this, they also have a top half of a C-3PO, part of a K-2SO, and pieces of the model kit of the original Millennium Falcon that they used for the 1977 film. Just a reminder that the way Lucasfilm approaches Easter eggs is not to imply canonicity of these things existing at this point in time in the world, but really just as a visual wink to fans. Because obviously R2-D2 right now in Star Wars history is with Luke Skywalker helping build that academy with those ant droids after Luke and R2's appearance in the Book of Boba Fett. R2 did not have some side adventure in Lanupa's junkyards living as a barnacle on a giant mama crab. To animate this giant thing, they actually used stop motion, old school techniques. And that's part of why it looks so tangible and authentic, but it's also classic Star Wars because that's how they moved the AT-ATs or AT-ATs, Imperial Walkers in the Battle of Hoth and Empire. The animation in the sequence was actually done by Phil Tippett's studio. Phil Tippett was the longtime ILM animator who worked on the original trilogy Star Wars films, on RoboCop and Jurassic Park. And it was his stop motion techniques that worked with the VFX team that made the dinosaurs look so great in that film. But Fern and Neil successfully land on one of the tow ships, moving the Onyx Cinder and steer it in to rescue KB and Wim. The Alpha Crab tosses a chunk of scrap at one of the other tow ships, sending them spiraling, but they survive and the four reunite, but they realize the Onyx Cinder is about to get Toy Story 3'd into a trash compactor furnace unit. KB recalls the ignition sequence just from watching SM-33, who, by the way, they refer to in the series often as just 33, and I've been wondering if it might be like a Disney Club 33 thing. I don't know. Between this sequence and the aerial rescue from a giant crab, I think we are seeing director Bryce Dallas Howard's expertise with this type of sequencing and frantic intercutting, as we saw in the Eris episode of The Mandalorian, that thrilling aerial escape sequence that ended that episode. Wim tries to shoot the compactor unit, but it fails. It's such a sweet kid thing to say, as like invincible isn't like a quality that falls on a spectrum. Something can't be too invincible. It just is or it isn't. The Onyx Cinder's reverse thrusters are just too little too late, and the compactor has its claws to chomp down on the hull. And Fern remembers the emergency hull demolition sequencer that SM-33 warned them about before. On the circular screen, the Orbesh translates to warning. Fern pulls the switch, and in a thrilling sequence, a series of detonations ripples across the hull, and an unseen inner body of the ship pulls out from the clunky hull like it's a sleeve, reminding us of Yondu extracting the quadrant from the exploding Ravager ship in Guardians Volume 2, or, as we have now come full circle, a hermit crab that is outgrowing its shell. I gasped when I realized how they were escaping, and I was just blown away to see how Bryce Dallas Howard pulled this off simply visually, with some pretty cool ship design, and in a way that linked with this wacky hermit crab wildlife of this episode, as well as with the central character, KB, who had to swap in new parts, a new shell, as she emotionally outgrew her shell with their friendships. And we end this episode with this new Onyx Cinder free of its pirate stripes and what now looks like a barnacled husk to this sleeker, lighter hull. This whole series up until now, the Onyx Cinder was made to look dirty. A pigpen dust cloud around it when it was parked outside Port Borgo, a random hubcap dropping off it when it landed on Lanupa, random dirt floating in our face after it hyperjumped away from At-Atten in episode 1's final shot. Now for the first time, there's no dirt. The dirt was just the old shell of the ship. Now we get what seems like a proper starship. It's less protected, but it is reforged. Comment down below with your thoughts on these 2 episodes. Follow me at EA Voss and subscribe to all 3 channels of the new Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye.